What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here for PackersNews.com. Once again, late in the evening on Monday, and new news after the firing of Dom Capers, the Packers not wasting any time. Ted Thompson transitioning to a new role inside the organization. First reported by NFL Network, confirmed by our Pete Doherty. Ted Thompson will not be the general manager going forward. The search for a new general manager begins now. Obviously, a lot of speculation will be swirling around this position. More likely than not, the Packers will look inside the organization first and foremost. Undoubtedly, they will cast a wide net. Mark Murphy has stated several times that they will employ a search firm if and when this moment did occur. So expect that to happen. But this is a team over the course of the last decade or so that has produced some of the best personnel people in the league who have gone on to do very good things, whether it's John Schneider in Seattle, Reggie McKenzie out in Oakland, John Dorsey, obviously, with the turnaround in KC and now being employed in Cleveland. The list goes on. These are all guys that have come out of Ron Wolf's system, as did Ted Thompson. And now it may be time for another young buck to step to the fore. Obviously, a lot of speculation will be around the name Elliott Wolf, but do not discount the possibility of Brian Gutekunst taking on the role. Alonzo Highsmith will undoubtedly be interviewed, as will Russ Ball, the cap guru and Ted's right-hand man for the last number of years. I see a lot of questions, a lot of comments. Let's see what people have to say. Now that everyone has gotten what they want, what will be the excuse next season? Sean, it's good to see you looking forward there. Do the returning defensive players fit a 4-3 better? Not necessarily. Why do I feel a certain number 12 QB might have hinted he would leave if changes weren't made? I don't agree with that at all. He's still got 2 years on his contract with no way of getting out of it, unless he threatened to retire, which I highly doubt. Do you think we will get a general manager who, sorry guys, they're going really fast, promote Elliott Wolf for Thompson's job? Brian, that may be a possibility. Like I said just a little bit ago, all of those guys will be looked at, and not just Wolf, but Gutekunst, Alonzo Highsmith, and Russ Ball. That kind of quartet there will be your kind of leaders in the clubhouse, so to speak. This means we might actually get some free agents, like good ones. Well, I would contend that Ted Thompson has gotten good free agents throughout the years, maybe just not a whole lot of them, but there's no arguing with the results of a Charles Woodson or a Julius Peppers or a Ryan Pickett, even Jared Cook. Those were all quality additions. So now obviously he has his missteps these last few years, but if you look at the totality of Ted Thompson's time as general manager in Green Bay, you can't call it anything but a success. Elliott Wolf is young, maybe Thompson as a mentor. I mean, he did get us this far. Chris, that's a possibility. Elliott Wolf is awfully young. I mean, I know a lot of people see that as a natural progression, but people like Russ Ball who have been in other organizations, maybe they go after John Schneider. I doubt that, but maybe that's someone who has, again, worked at another organization and has built a proven winner. Elliott Wolf is very unproven. There's not a whole lot of track record there as far as, his decision making, his roster building. Obviously, his acumen, his player evaluation is well known, well regarded throughout the league, but you never really know with a guy until he's in that chair making those decisions. Is Mike gone? GM will want his own guy. Randall, that's a possibility if whoever it is coming from the outside. I would tend to think if they're coming from inside the organization, they'll most likely stick with McCarthy, but that is definitely in play, especially seeing as Mike McCarthy has 1 year left on his deal. Russ Ball has to be our best option since John Dorsey is off the market. The one hesitation I have with Russ Ball is his background is on the finance side of things. He's not a scout by trade. He's not a personnel guy. And I know the Packers, Ted Thompson, they've gone out of their way the last couple of years to kind of talk up his bona fides on the personnel side, on the scouting side, saying that he does, break down tape and he does all the regular work that most personnel people do. And that's all well and good. But I tend to think you want a lifelong scout in that role. That is, the way it's been in Green Bay since Ron Wolf revitalized the franchise back in the early 90s. It has proven to be successful, and the one time they kind of went away from that is when they put Mike Sherman in charge, and we all saw what happened. So, and I'm not. That's not to disparage Russ Ball. I think, like I said a little bit earlier about Elliott Wolf, you don't really know until someone's in that position, and that's kind of the catch-22 when you're hiring a GM in the NFL. But that would be my one pause there. If it were my franchise, which thankfully for all of you it is not, but if it were mine, I would want a guy who came up through the personnel side. Raji as defensive coordinator. Nice. Get the Raji mention going. I like it. I think Green Bay is a tough place to GM. Hope it's for the best. Need a great plan in the draft and free agency. I agree with that, if only because of the fishbowl aspect. Now, of course, Ted Thompson escaped a lot of that, especially in the last few years, by basically just disappearing from the public light throughout the entire season. Is John Schneider an option? I would think so. Now, John Schneider used to have a clause in his contract that stated that if and when the Packer job came open, he could jump without penalty and they couldn't stop him. However, it was widely reported when he signed his new deal in Seattle that that clause was no longer in his contract. Now, that said, we still have yet to hear from Pete Carroll out there in Seattle, and there was scuttlebutt around the league that he may decide to retire. And if that were the case, one might think that it would possibly be a good time for a good clean break for Schneider from Seattle. Now, obviously, that's all speculation, but Schneider's ties to the Packers are obviously well known, very deep. I have to think that would be a possibility for Murphy, but we won't really know until we get some reporting on who they are calling for interviews. Let's see. Is the GM job an attractive one in Green Bay? Matt, I think so. You've got final say on the roster. That's how it's built. That's how it's been since Ron Wolf remade the franchise. You've got final say on that roster. You've got some of the best facilities in the league. You've got the history of the franchise that you can play up. You've got a great home field, possibly a home field that you can rebuild the home field advantage for. And you've got Aaron Rodgers. Now, that puts you ahead of the game in and of itself for the next 5 years. So, yeah, I think it's in a league where there are only 32 of those jobs. Having Rodgers and having everything I just talked about, yeah, it's pretty attractive. If they promote from within, would the free agent philosophy change? Yes. And I know a lot of people will say, well, you can't necessarily say that, et cetera, et cetera. No. Yes, it would change. I have talked to enough of these guys throughout the years to know that Ted Thompson's conservative nature is a function of Thompson and not of any kind of organizational philosophy. A lot of these guys have, throughout the years, brought ideas to Thompson that have been shot down. I have little doubt that you will see maybe not wholesale aggressiveness in contrast to Thompson, but you will see a different approach, especially when it comes to free agency. Would they make Mike coach GM? Didn't work well with Sherman? No, and I think that's the very big reason why they wouldn't. Obviously, Mark Murphy wasn't here for that, but it's hard for me to imagine them giving McCarthy that kind of role, especially seeing if there is a very well-known precedent sitting out there for why that is a bad idea. Would John Dorsey be the favorite if he hadn't gone to Cleveland? Sean, I think so. Absolutely. Heard that the defensive line coach and the linebacker coach got fired. True? Yes, Lorraine, that is true. Mike Turgovac and McSorley, the inside linebackers coach, were both relieved of their duties today. Is there a Rooney rule for GMs? Yes, there is. In fact, it is just the Rooney rule. It was expanded to include the general manager role a few years ago. So you can look for an African American or another minority to be interviewed sometime within the coming week. Did you have a say in this? No, Chase, I had no say in this. Who's your choice for the GM position? Brendan, I really don't have one. I tend to think, as I was saying a little bit earlier, you never really know with giving a guy a general manager job until they sit in that chair. You don't really know. So it's hard to say when guys don't have a track record to draw from. I think John Schneider would do a very good job. I think John Dorsey would have done a great job if he hadn't gone to Cleveland. But those guys both have track records that you can look at. As far as Wolf or Highsmith or Ball, it's impossible to say. I think every one of them would do a good job, but I don't know who the best would be, and I would just be throwing darts basically to tell you who the favorite should be. Your face looks smooth. Oh well, fresh shave and all that. Was this TT's decision or Mark Murphy's? It's a good question, Matthew. Nothing early to indicate either way. I did speak with someone inside 1265 Lombardi just a little bit ago, and they wouldn't say either way. But I would tend to think it was probably a mutual decision. That's just guesswork on my part. But we'll probably know more as the evening goes on and as the week goes on. Where's Ted heading? Scouting? Brian? I think so. There's nothing definitive now. Nobody's talking, but I would tend to think yes, he'll have some kind of advisory / scouting role, something where he can sit and still do his tape breakdowns in some film room somewhere. Maybe he'll do some regional scouting back home in Texas, but I can't imagine that he will do anything even remotely outside of scouting. There'll be tight-lipped as a formality? Yeah, most likely. I mean, I'm sure there will be an official announcement probably tomorrow or the next day, but they'll be I can't imagine they'll offer much up. McCarthy is by far the worst coach in the NFL. Thomas, that is a ridiculous statement, but I'm glad you typed it in all caps and felt good about it. Seeing on how Ted never talks to the media, I assume there won't be a press conference with him, correct? I would be absolutely shocked if there was a press conference for him. In fact, maybe one of the things he wanted to do was never have to do a press conference again, so he stepped aside. I can't imagine. I'm sure there will be some kind of press availability when they hire someone, but I would be absolutely shocked if Ted got in front of the cameras ever again. Does the GM position get filled before the defensive coordinator position? That's a great question, because if it is an outside GM, you have to think they're going to want to hire their own coach, which would mean Mike McCarthy would be gone, which would mean he can't hire a defensive coordinator. So I would tend to think they got to hire a general manager first. But maybe they have already assured McCarthy that the job is his and the new general manager, whoever he is, will be saddled with him. I think that would be a mistake, but this is unusual territory for the Packers at this moment. When do you think a new GM will be hired? I would say within the week. I can't imagine it would take much longer. I'm trying to remember the last time when they hired McCarthy. I want to say it took 10 days. That might be a little longer than that, but I would say roughly a week probably. Do you think the Packers already have someone in mind for GM, which is why Thompson made the decision this quickly? I'm sure this has been coming. I'm sure this wasn't a surprise. I'm sure this has been planned. Now, does Murphy have someone in mind? Possibly. He has said in the past that he has said both that he had a succession plan and he said he doesn't have a succession plan. So your guess is as good as mine. I would tend to think though that they've known this was coming for some time. A new GM shouldn't be saddled with anyone. Justin, I absolutely agree. I'm guessing that they know already who the new GM is going to be. Possibly. Didn't Green Bay just promote Wolf last year to keep him? Yes, and Brian Gutekunst. They promoted both of them the last 2 years, maybe 3, giving them raises and new titles the last 3 years in a row. Is Elliott Wolf the obvious next in line? Not necessarily, Jake. I would tend to think Russ Ball is probably the more obvious next in line, but that's just guesswork. If Mike McCarthy is not the coach next year, I will be very disappointed. Well, I think the opinion on that is pretty split, judging by the comments here and the mentions on my Twitter. Wasn't Sean Payton the first choice for Ted Thompson? No, if he had been, he would have hired him. He actually hired McCarthy instead of Payton, and then Payton got hired down in New Orleans. Which influential candidate do you think is most qualified and why? Matt, first of all, go back and watch what I just said a little while ago. I talked about it pretty extensively, but short version is it's just impossible to know. Will the new GM or the defensive coordinator affect the draft selection more? Definitely the general manager. That's his gig. Any change in defensive scheme this upcoming year, Zach? Absolutely. Whoever this new defensive coordinator is, even if it's someone in-house, if, say, a Darren Perry or Joe Witt, I can't imagine they keep the same scheme. But stay tuned. Do you think the Lindsley and Adams moves were done with this already in play? Yes, I do. Obviously, I can't report that because I don't have anything on it other than my gut. But yes, it's kind of what I thought the moment they happened, actually. But I think it made a lot of financial sense. But I also think it kind of felt, and I think I tweeted this out, it did feel like the Packers getting their ducks in the row heading into the offseason for just this kind of occasion. But that's just, like I said, that's just guesswork. After seeing McCarthy work with his guy at backup, I gotta correct you there, sir. Brett Hundley was not his guy. He went to bat for him, yes, and he very sternly went to bat for him, as we all remember in the media. But that's not his guy. That's Ted Thompson's guy. Ted Thompson drafted him, and Ted Thompson placed him on the 53-man roster. And Mike McCarthy has to work with it. Now, like I said, McCarthy put on a brave face and obviously got behind Hundley because he had to. Because he knew his general manager wasn't exactly about to call Colin Kaepernick or what have you. But that's Ted Thompson's guy. And that's, frankly, probably one of the reasons that this move is being made. For everything that Ted Thompson has done for the organization, and the list is long and plentiful on the good side of the ledger, sticking with Brett Hundley and not going outside and either signing a veteran backup this offseason and or during the season, that's on Thompson. And it essentially threw a season away because once Rodgers went down, they were absolutely screwed. So that's something that Thompson gets to put on his score sheet. Will new defensive coach be on the sideline instead of the box? I have no idea. Depends on the coach. Do you think Joe Callahan will be the number 2 now? No, I think they will draft somebody and or find somebody in free agency. Come on, man. He was McCarthy's guy as well. No. Do people not understand how this works? McCarthy stuck with him because he had to. It's not like McCarthy could call somebody. Not like McCarthy could say, hey, Ted, go get me a quarterback. Or it's not like he could go call an agent and say, hey, bring in so-and-so for a workout. That is Ted Thompson's job. McCarthy's going to put a brave face on it in the public, but there's not much else he can do. If the Packers won the Super Bowl, does this move happen? Great question, Dean. I'm going to go with no, but possibly. I mean, it was rumored last year. If you remember, there were a couple of unsubstantiated reports, as far as I could tell, last offseason about rumblings about this happening. And, offseason came and went and it didn't happen, and then we all kind of forgot about it. But now here it is, and it is happening. And last year, when those reports were rumbling, they were, coming off of an NFC Championship game. So I doubt it, but maybe. You never really know. Can we put Ted Thompson behind a beer stand for his new job? Andrew, that's just rude. McCarthy could have played Callahan, who actually could complete a pass. I mean, go back and watch the Detroit game like I did this morning. Watch the first half. There were like 5 drop passes. That's not on Hundley. Now, I understand wanting to put Callahan in. Heck, I said a couple weeks ago they should put Callahan in. But let's not kill Hundley for things that are his receiver's fault. In the long run, this is the best for the Packers. Kenny, I tend to agree. How will that first draft be altered with the hire of a new GM? It really depends on who they hire and what their philosophy is and how aggressive they want to be. Mike's job is to coach. Ted's job is to supply the talent. Nate, thank you. Perfectly stated. You and your buddies excited for the potential for a more media-friendly GM? I'm not excited for anything. Right now I'm excited to get back to playing with my kids, which is what I was doing when this news broke. Well, Ted Thompson staying with the organization, what are the chances that whoever the new GM is still has Ted Thompson over his shoulder? I don't see that as a problem. I tend to think Ted will keep to himself in his dark room, breaking down tape, and he will undoubtedly answer any question that he's asked, but I don't see him as a lording over someone kind of guy. Has anyone said they want GM? Well, Jordan, I mean, Elliot Wolf and Brian and Alonzo have all interviewed for jobs. And that's pretty much a declaration of wanting a gig, a general manager gig, but I don't think anybody's come out and publicly stomped for it. Had to happen. Will, I tend to agree. What do I think of the Browns going 0-16? I think they should be a healthy reminder for Packers fans everywhere just how well they've had it for the last 20 years. What about Mike Holmgren? He wanted to be a GM when he coached here. Yeah, Nate, he did. And then he went to Seattle and did that with Ted Thompson's help. And then he went to Cleveland and was absolutely terrible in personnel. He's one of the best play callers I've ever seen. Great head coach. He should be nowhere near the personnel side of things. Can we get Gruden, please, to coach this team? PJ, no. Gruden's going to Oakland. Let's see. Think Ted has any departing words? Matt, I highly doubt it. Maybe he'll put out a statement at some point, but I can't imagine he will get in front of the press and give a speech or take questions or anything like that. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to your question. They do go by very fast, but it's amazing how many of you are here. Make sure you're checking PackersNews.com. Pete Doherty should have an initial report up sometime soon if he doesn't already. We'll be covering this. We'll be covering the Dom Capers situation and the search for new defensive coordinator as well as new general manager. Thanks a lot, everyone. Check PackersNews.com for all the latest, and I'll talk to you soon.